to our session today. Thanks so much for coming. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the customer first approach and how data and insights can help form a relevant brand strategy and customer experience. So first things first, we'll just introduce ourselves. My name's Nicole and I'm one of the Client Services Directors at Focus.
And I'm James and I'm one of the hosts also from Focus. I'm the BTR Group Account Director and I'm leading up the strategic partnership between Focus and the UKAA.
Something to just remind you guys, while we're going through, we have got a little Slido poll. So if you want to go online and type in sli.do, and the code is just on the bottom of the screens there, there'll be some of the questions that we're asking throughout our session today that if you'd like to vote, that would be great. We're going to be taking those results, and if you want to pop by our stand later, we can let you know what those results were. And that is because this is a little graphic of what we do as the Focus Group, and that first point is home track and data, and it's defining your target audience. So a lot of the work that we do is around data and getting insights wherever we can, hence why you guys as professionals in the sector today can help us hopefully and get a little bit of insight. Number 2 is more on the REBA stage, so design of the relevant communal spaces, all based upon that home track and data that we do at that first stage. Then we move into the branding and creative, through to REBA stages 3 to 5. Then obviously a big focus is the recruitment strategy, how we're going to lease up these assets of yours, and then retention as well. So I'm not going to go any further into that, that's just a little graphic. If you want to know more, you can come and talk to us a bit later on. Now it's time to introduce our lovely panel. Thanks guys for joining us. Do we start with you, So?
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Trotman. I'm the head of placemaking for Notting Hill Genesis and Folio London.
Hi, I'm Jo. I work for Fresh. A lot of you in the room might think of Fresh and student accommodation, but actually we do a lot of BTR and COVID as well.
Hi there, I'm Paul Belson. I'm an independent consultant in the PRS and build to rent space. I've been in the industry a long time. Some of you will know me. I was on the government PRS task force back in 2014 and 2015 and worked with a wide variety of stakeholders across the sector.
Hello, I'm Ted Hunt. I'm an independent creative strategist, predominantly in marketing and branding, with a particular focus on digital and social, although in the world we live now that kind of bleeds out into everything, so it's more of an integrated approach, with predominant experience in FMCG. My background was at Innocent Drinks, the smoothie company, so very much in kind of entrepreneurial thinking and disruptive thinking.
Great. So we'll get cracking with the questions then, James, over to you.
Thank you. Without further ado, we'll head on with our questions. Just to let you guys know that this one is a Slido question, so if you did want to submit your answers, the questions should be live shortly. So the first question, in your opinion, when does the customer journey begin? From the point a person first discovers a brand, the point they first show interest, or the point they arrive on site, and why is that?
In my personal opinion, I would actually challenge this a little bit. So I think that it starts at the very beginning. So I think this is when you look at the design and bidding stage, when you look at the land and planning stage. I think that's when we should first start looking at our branding strategies, our customers, who these people are, who's going to eventually end up renting there. And I think that's when we need to start doing it as an industry. I think historically that's not always been the case, and I think we need to start thinking about it at the earliest point, especially in my background's in housing associations, and build to rent has not always had that insight from the very early on, and I think that's something that we need to really work on moving forward as an industry and a sector.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Sophie on that point. And I think as an industry, it'd be really interesting to know whether our renter customers have just happened to accidentally find their way into a built-to-rent project, or what their journey was to actually get there. Certainly for some of the bigger built-to-rent projects, things like Get Living at Stratford and Quintain at Wembley, the whole placemaking element has to start at a very early stage.
I agree.
Super. So given that, do you think the advent of BTR is changing the customer experience, taking it from beyond those sort of first impressions and making a sale into part of the retention strategy itself? And if so, how are you ensuring a positive customer experience?
when renters go and do that first viewing, they absolutely want to have that amazing first impression. But what they also want to do during that viewing is know exactly what the resident and customer experience will be like for them. And I think, therefore, residents teams have kind of two challenges. What they need to do is make sure they're selling that customer experience during the viewing, but they also need to make sure they're delivering on the promises when that renter becomes a resident. So with that in mind, I think that viewing, therefore, becomes the first stage in your retention strategy. And I think if you can nail the retention strategy, your retention strategy, you're maximising your retention levels, but you're also providing yourself with loads of content from those residents that you can then use in your marketing as experience marketing, so it's kind of a win-win situation.
Yep, again, totally agree with what you're saying there. I mean, obviously, retaining our renter customers is going to be vital, and actually everyone is a winner here, all of the stakeholders from end to end. And of course, we've got to bear in mind that as BTR grows across the country, there's going to be a lot more competitive tension starting to happen between projects. So if you've got a good rental customer that's been with you for some time, the last thing that you want is to lose them to the newest and latest and greatest across the road because they're giving away free pizzas.
Do you think free pizzas are a good customer experience?
Ted, I remember we had a conversation the other day about you saying BTR is more of like a service-based economy, sort of switching the traditional sales funnel as such.
Yeah, so if we look at it as its point of difference from a build-to-sell market, where essentially in a classic marketing funnel, you've got awareness, consideration, conversion, and at the point of conversion, everything stops. But when you go to rent, it's a monthly conversion. It's carrying on and on and on, which is something completely different, I think. So then you bleed out of this classic awareness, consideration, conversion into loyalty and advocacy, which to me then has got a far more familiarity with the service economy than it does kind of just production and manufacturing, just creating a high-ticket item and selling that on and then moving to a new acquisition, a new customer. So I think that presents a really interesting challenge, but also lots of opportunities. So lots of transferable lessons from other sectors that are very used to this and very good at levering what works in that sector.
I guess that goes back to what Joanna was saying as well, in terms of there's kind of two customer experiences, right? There's one when you come to view the property that you're hoping to live in, and then there's one once you're in there and the way that you get dealt with and get treated as a customer of that asset, of that building.
So question for you. This is another of our Slido questions. For anyone that's taking part on Slido, the question will be live shortly. From our personal experience within the BTR sector, we've kind of come to learn that striking a balance between operator-led and development-led branding is really important. So just wanted to ask the panel what they think their sort of perfect balance is between either being operator-led or development-led and the mix with the two.
I personally think when you're going to rent, you're choosing the place first. So I think the location is key. I think a lot of the time we focus on the build-to-rent operator brand, which is important, but I think when you're looking at the customer journey and what people are doing, they're going to the place first. They've chosen a location, they've chosen that place for a reason, and I think that needs to be key in your strategies and in your branding and in your marketing, like really driving that place. And then the operator brand for me kind of sits as an umbrella. So when we talk about those two customer journeys as well, like having people in and they start to know who you are and know how your business works and know like what it is renting with you, then they might choose to rent in different locations. But I think first and foremost, it should be about the location. It should be purely focused on place. And then the operator brand is like a nicety, I always say, like as like, oh, what a great service. I might now choose to rent in Canary Wharf rather than Stratford, for example. So I think that's really key, personally.
I mean, I agree that property, if you can get a really strong property brand, that's great, but there are clients out there that don't necessarily want to invest in that property brand because branding is expensive. So I think that's where the operator brand can come into play. Therefore you just need a property name, and then you've got the operator brand that can offer the rest. At Fresh we do property branding, but we also offer the operator brand too, and we see that as having a halo effect. So, it might be that you have the property name, but the halo effect is it might be that, you know, if we win an award, all our properties then can then benefit from that award. It might be if we've got more than one property in a city, we can consolidate our SEO, our PPC, and that's a cost saving for the client. But I do think we know renters are becoming more transient. So it'll be interesting to see how that operator brand grows and the importance of it in the future and having consistent kind of USPs from city to city.
Yeah, I think as well, like sometimes it's very easy to look at it from like our perspective, right? We all work in the industry, we all know the industry, and actually when you put yourself in the mind of a customer, are they going to know like your brand and actually care about your brand, like, or are they just going to go, I want to rent in Stratford, I want to rent in Canary Wharf? Like, I think sometimes you really have to put yourself in the renter's shoes and kind of disassociate yourself from our industry, because I think it's very easy to get caught up in everyone knows build to rent and it's great and we all do this, but actually people are going on Rightmove and just looking at the prices in the place. So I think that's like a really key point and something that everyone should like be aware of in our industry, that that's like the competition. It's not just other build to rent suppliers, it's the standalone landlords that are offering cheaper rent in the same location. So I think that's like really important, and that's why like I just said it again, but the place brand is like super key, and then the operator is like a nicety, as in, yeah, that'd be my opinion.
I think I'm a bit divided on this one actually, and one of Brendan Gerrit's favourite catchphrases is brand before building. But what we're seeing across the sector is a lot of segmentation happening in terms of location, in terms of renter proposition, in terms of amenitization and so on. And, you know, at the moment, all that we really know is sort of what we don't know. Buildings fill up with a wide diversity of renters for different reasons. And we also know that, you know, what perhaps would work in Canary Wharf won't work in Cardiff. So, you know, data, insights, intel, understanding of the market and its dynamics is absolutely key.
I think on that point as well, like going back to when we were saying when we should start thinking about the customer journey, if you do it at that very early stage, you're focusing on the place, you're focusing on, okay, who is going to end up renting here, who is our target market, all the way at that land and planning, at that bidding, at that design stage, designing the buildings correctly, getting all that information to make sure your product suits your customer. I think that kind of links to what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as well maybe there's a third customer experience here in what we're saying about, and I know me and you, Paul, have had a conversation about the search for BTR. You know, BTR is not a sector that normal people outside of this room and this conference probably are aware of as much as we would like them to be. So, you know, that whole search to get to the place or the operator brand, whichever is decided as being the most important, how does that look? And I think we all agree that that could probably be better than it is right now, and that, you know, yes, Rightmove gives you the option for place, price, go from there, but we've had discussions about whether that could be turned around in terms of the lifestyle that you want to lead at that development. Does it need to have amenities? Does it need to have all of that kind of stuff? And maybe doing the search from there if you're not so wedded to a place. So that's a kind of pre-customer journey really before it even hits you guys that needs to be considered and factored in and potentially be better than it is currently, or different, shall I say.
Yeah, and maybe there's something we could do as a group, as an industry, to actually get build to rent out there. I think, like, yeah, okay, we all know it, but actually if I surveyed 100 of my friends, would they actually know what build to rent means? Probably not. So actually as an industry, maybe there's something we can do as a collective to really like get build to rent out there, to get the benefits of it, and like use those operator brands to really sell build to rent as a product. Because I don't think we're there yet with making it kind of on the mainstream.
Even though we're having this conversation about customer experience and what we could all be doing better or differently or whatever, you know, part of the reason why BTR is so good for people that, you know, are interested in it is because of the customer experience they get, right? But we're maybe not talking about it enough for people to know that, because if you take that compared to a private landlord, the customer experience normally is shocking. So if we're doing it well, we're not shouting about it enough, I don't think.
I think that could hugely disrupt the market is the entry of a company like John Lewis, such a huge established brand. They may well bring that awareness to BTR that's lacking in the market at the moment. Great. So next question: how early do you believe a brand should be considered when launching a BTR development?
Right at the beginning. I think that as a client or as a developer, you know, when you're looking at the design of your building, you're looking at the location, you're looking at the audience, and that's exactly what you look at when you're producing a brand. So it completely makes sense to do both at the same time. You know, there are examples out there of really well-designed properties where we know the brand just looks like an afterthought and there's just no kind of cohesion, and that's what you need. You know, as a company, we offer an advisory service which is completely standalone. So, you know, we're happy to go in at that very early stage and advise on that brand, on that design, so that what you have when you get operational is a really, really strong property, but also a really strong brand. So, you know, again, that's another win-win, and it's going to connect with your audience straight away.
Yeah, definitely. I also think like branding, when you talk about it, people think it's a pretty logo, it's nice colours, and actually it can be so much more than that. It can be brought into the building, it can be brought into the landscaping, it can really shape like how your building is actually managed and how the operations work and how development take it through. And I think like we need to just always consider the brand at the very beginning so that that does happen, because far too often we get buildings and then you just chuck a brand on it, and it should actually be the other way around. It should be the brand influences the building, you know, has that landscaping that brings in your brand. Like all of that is so important, and it's those little things that a customer will pick up on and just go, oh, that's cute. And like it seems so tiny, but it's so important. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes good common sense if you can embed your brand at the earliest possible stage. And I know that Ted is going to say something in a minute about advocacy. But we also kind of at a practical level have to realise as an industry, what we're doing is we're actually contributing towards and creating a much more fluid and transient rental market. You know, most schemes that we go to these days, you can do a tenant-free deposit scheme. There's tenant-only breaks on lots of schemes as well. So, you know, we're actually contributing towards a much more fluid and mobile transient rental market.
Something that really focuses for me as well as a conversation we had, I think last week, we were just talking about the difference between placemaking and place shaping. Placemaking spoken a lot about in development, but it's also, there's always an assumption with placemaking. If you're saying you're making something, it's almost like you're starting from scratch, like there was nothing there before. But very few developments are like greenfield site. They have histories, they have communities, there's legacy there, which place shaping accepts more. So we're going to shape this place from what it was before and help it move forward, where the making it is almost a slightly arrogant assumption that what was there before, because it was worse, because the reason you develop is always to better something, that because it was worse, you just have to get rid of it, sweep it aside. And I think that synthesizes some of these arguments that we're saying.
I totally agree. We shouldn't forget the history of what was there. That should actually be incorporated into the branding. That should be incorporated into your strategies. You should look at the history. You should look at who was there before and actually take that into what you've got now. Because I think that helps with PR, that helps with marketing, that helps with everything. Like far too often people just go, right, start afresh. And it's like, actually,
what's led to criticisms like gentrification.
100%. Like, there's no reason, like, everyone's going to say that if that's what everyone does. So actually, if you can incorporate that and kind of celebrate it rather than just cover it up, I think that's a really important part.
And I think it embeds your asset, your development, your building into the community as well. You know, we're talking about customer experience, and yes, okay, we want the perfect customer experience when someone walks in the door of our building, obviously, and any contact they've had with us pre that, but you've got the journey from the train station or you've got the drive up there, and that's also part of the customer experience, right? So if it's embedded into the community, it doesn't feel like we've just plonked a building there, and yes, it's lovely inside, look how beautiful it is, but we've not thought about how it connects to the people who live in that area and the space that's around it as well.
I think that's really important what you just said as well about the community, because obviously, you know, we're all striving for ESG, and actually having that link with the community is going to be so important in that property ESG.
Penultimate question, and again, this one is one of our Slido questions for anyone who's answering in the audience as well. So they are, do the panel, do you have any consistent challenges you all face when you're putting together a brand or a launch strategy for a development? And if so, how have you overcome them?
okay, let me think. So probably the biggest challenge is, for me personally, is actually getting that branding, that marketing, that vision set at the very beginning. I know we've spoken about it a lot, especially me, banged on about it, but I really think, coming from a housing association background, that's never been something we've done in the past. When looking at build to rent, even looking at sales as well, it's always been you get a building handed over and then you start. So actually flipping that and starting at the very beginning and just, you know, kind of changing that way of thinking and changing that like structure of how we think about these developments and we think about these places and we think about these customer journeys. For me, that's the biggest challenge, is kind of getting people to change their mindset and getting people to understand that it doesn't happen once you get the building. There's a whole process before that that is so important. So I would say that's probably one of my biggest challenges.
Sophie, how do you try to overcome it?
I talk a lot. So I'm always just dropping into meetings like, oh, design review, I'll pop in. I think talking to different teams and talking to people, and actually as an industry, like talking to other people in the industry and saying like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like getting those like tips and tricks and just being present and being like, this is what I need. This is what's going to make my marketing right. This is what's going to make my place the best it can be. And just putting that forward and saying, this is what I need to do that, whether that's development or whoever it is. It's just putting your needs, like, and just being quite strong with it, just being like, this is it. If you want this to work, this is what it is.
Fair enough.
I mean, for me, the challenge is with the building owners and the clients, and getting them to really accept that as part of your launch strategy, you've got to invest in the full marketing mix. I think there's kind of a lot of opinion out there that the conversion activities are what's needed, because, you know, you can see your return on investment from those, and let's face it, they are great lead generators, but if you want the longevity for once you're operational for your property, you want the awareness out there, you want to have your position in the local market, you've got to invest in those activities further up the funnel. So, you know, whether that's your PR, your review platforms for when your residents move in, all those kind of activities where it might be harder to show the return on investment, but they are just so crucial. And I think in terms of kind of how we try and overcome that, you know, it's just trying to work out the worth of those activities. So, you know, really drilling down and trying to kind of put a cost per acquisition or whatever on those and presenting those to the client, and just looking at the greater effects of those activities.
That's like social impact as well, right? So a lot of build to rent is about how people feel when they move in and how they feel as part of that place, and how they're like, oh, I feel great now I live here. Like, how do you actually measure that, and how do you actually say this has worked, this strategy has worked? And that's quite a difficult thing to measure. And I think we find that across the sector, that measuring that social impact is quite a challenge. But like you said, like review platforms, case studies, just trying to do as much as we can to prove that social impact is really important industry-wide.
Yeah, I think going back to what we said at the beginning, that experience marketing, you know, having those reviews that you can use in your marketing, you can like really help you sell that customer journey, and that, you know, it's going to create waiting lists. So you might not even need those conversion activities at the bottom of the funnel. So, you know, your job's done if you do get relets, so that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of at a high level, you know, that there's this sort of fairly glib statement, which is sort of build it and they will come, or maybe they will and maybe they won't. But I think we do have a lot of lessons in industry to learn from the hotel and hospitality sector. And I know that you guys do a lot of work with the residential development sector as well, so getting an understanding of kind of typical marketing budgets and what the spend needs to be to have an effective campaign is going to be really key.
Yeah, I think it's different with B2. I think it's more like what Joanna's saying in terms of quantifying some of that stuff, in terms of, you know, obviously you've got your figures in terms of retention, but like you're saying, so how people feel living in BTR, how it's changed their lives. You know, yeah, it's like those little stands where you have the green face to the red face, like, as you come out the door. But it's little things like that. It is hard to quantify. You know, build to sale, it's very, this is your budget, crack on, get the sale, you get, you know, yeah, exactly. But BTR, it is more about the community, the feeling, the customer experience. Build to sale, you build the houses, they move in, and then it's like no one was ever there before that, you know. Community, and that is sometimes last on the list, unfortunately, for that kind of an industry. So it's really flipping it on its head with BTR and thinking that customer experience for 10, 15, 20 years. You know, these pension funds, people are investing for long term, aren't they? So it's not just getting something to work for 2-3 years, it's getting something to feel like it's part of the community, the fabric of that place, and that people love living there and hopefully have waiting lists, like you say.
I know we've kind of had conversations in the past about helping our clients to quantify spending money on promoting their brand as opposed to their specific products. And I know, Ted, we were talking the other day about Net Promoter Score that you've used in the past and how that is a way you can actually quantify what is deemed unquantifiable to a degree.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think this is another area where we can really take learnings from other sectors who've been able to quantify the qualitative, which essentially is branding and marketing, which is always seen as a bit of a dark art because you can't get hard numbers on it. So when I was at Innocent, we used to use something called Net Promoter Score to measure advocacy, which is essentially just asking all of your consumers how likely they are to recommend this product to a friend out of a score from 1 to 10, and then you take everyone that scored you 7, 8 or 9 that's highly likely to recommend from what are called detractors, the people that give you 1, 2 or 3, you just remove the ones in the middle because they're just mediocre, they got no high opinion anyway, and that is your Net Promoter Score. But it was the top of the pyramid of all of the measures that Innocent used to measure performance, because one of the founders came from Bain, the consultant, and they did a piece of work around the turn of the millennium. They just looked at all of the companies in different sectors of the market and found out the companies that outperformed in the market, whatever the sector was, and what they had in common. And what they had in common was they all had high Net Promoter Scores, high levels of advocacy from existing consumers. So I thought, right, if you get that right, everything else follows. So it was a formula that Innocent used and sold for millions, as we've seen in the press, and lots of other people use it as well to kind of, like, as you say, this halo effect. How do we measure it? It's not proven yet in kind of development, but I think it just gives a basis to show that we can put quantitative numbers onto qualitative elements.
And just interested to know from the panel, do you think one of the challenges that you face at the moment is speed? Like, we live in a generation now where, particularly renters, where they're used to ordering something from Amazon Prime and it will turn up the next day, whereas a lot of renters, they may be living in a privately rented where they can give their 1 month's notice, they can leave, and then do they expect to move into a development that you're constructing straight away? And how would you kind of deal with that scenario?
100%. I mean, our industry is so fast-paced, like so fast-paced. I think it's quite disruptive as well. When Build to Rent has come in, I think we've kind of, when you look at developers, they're a bit like, wait, what? You need a show home only 3 months before, and you need all these things, and they're used to working with sales, and they're just a bit behind. I think there's some work to do to keep up with us. I think we are really disruptive, and we are like, right, quickly get this done, get this like sorted. And I think there is some work about that kind of spreading throughout the housing sector as well. I think Build to Rent is I think people look at Build to Rent actually and take quite a lot of inspiration from the fast-pacedness, from the speed that people work and how we work and how we look at things differently and put the customer first. And I know that's definitely being looked at in sales now and other kind of industries. So I think, yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, but I think we actually do it quite well in Build to Rent. Like, it is fast-paced, and yeah.
I think from what we've seen with some of the Build to Rent clients that we work with is that timing being fast, but also all parts moving together. So you're not pushing ahead with, you know, your target lease update or whatever, and then your amenity spaces are a little bit lagging behind. You've got to quickly try and G that up a little bit to try and get it hand in hand, or change your strategy slightly because your amenity spaces aren't going to be ready. So I guess that's a bit of a challenge maybe in the industry as well, is getting all the arms working at the same time.
Pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, little like marionettes.
I think as well, just as consumers, we expect things to happen quickly. So if you send an email, you want it responded to within 24 hours, you know, so it's taking all those elements into your customer journey again. So, yeah.
Do you take requests on like social media and WhatsApp, your guys? Yeah.
We would, so I should clarify that. We absolutely would. We don't, you know, push people towards those platforms, but we would obviously reply to them.
Yeah, I went to a talk the other day about WhatsApp and how it can be used for customer service, and I was like, why is everyone not doing this? Yeah, that's what I went to a talk on. It was so good.
Amazing. Our
Yeah.
lettings team use it, and it's incredible. Like, you can advertise your developments on there. Like, it's amazing. Like,
And So I ordered something from an online shop the other day, and they used iMessage, and they were replying to me on iMessage, and that was the top channel that they sort of suggested to speak to them on, and that really brings it right into someone's personal life. You know, emails, I don't know if it's because we work in offices and stuff, but emails feel quite formal and corporate, whereas actually that connection through WhatsApp or iMessage is actually a bit more personal and makes me feel like, oh, maybe they're kind of, obviously Pretty Little Thing is not my friend, but when it came up on my iMessage, I was like, oh, hi guys.
100%. And it's that fast pace as well.
Yeah.
People they send a text, they want to reply to you straight away.
Dots coming up.
Exactly. Like, type in. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
Okay, cool. Last question. Right, so I'm going to do this one. It's going to be a little bit of a quick fire one. I'm not going to like, but we're going to end with Ted doing a little bit of a presentation, about 10-15 minutes on his kind of FMCG experience and things that we could be learning and taking through into BTR. If you're not already, I don't know, some people in this room might be quite advanced and be doing some of this stuff, but before we get there, I'm going to go along the line. So Sophie, is there anything you believe the sector is not doing in terms of branding and customer experience that you think is a real opportunity for BTR that we should be pushing for sharpish?
I think the one thing maybe we're not doing is working together a bit more. So as providers, I think there's a lot of things in the press about like dodgy landlords, rogue landlords, but there's never anything in the press about build to rent as an industry as a whole. Like rogue landlords has got its own brand almost, like, and we don't have our own brand. And build to rent, is that the right term? Do people actually know what that means? Is that right? Can we change something, make it a bit have something that's a bit more like consumer friendly, and then work together to push that forward and change that message of rogue landlords to look what else there is.
Competition, joining up,
Yeah.
linking arms and doing it together. Joanna, you?
I mean, Sophie just nicked my answer. But no, I think that means we're on the same page. I think if we all work in silo, we're never going to move forward. So it's really important that we kind of share these kind of knowledge bank, if you like, and get things moving and get the awareness out there.
And it's such a new industry as well, isn't it? So now's the time to do it. If you wait another 5 years, Paul probably got something to say about this, but if you wait another 5 years, 10 years, it might be a bit too late. Everyone might have gone off on their own path. So now's probably the time. Paul, what's your answer?
I mean, look, we're all stakeholders in the sector, and it's really down to all of us to get the message out there, really, to our market, to our customers, what build to rent is all about, and the benefits and so on. I mean, we heard earlier the lady from Savills saying over the last few years there's been 500,000 private renter landlords that have exited the sector. Well, that tends to suggest to me there's 500,000 rental customers out there that weren't there before. So, you know, the opportunity's there. We're just going to get the message across in the right way.
Okay, Ted. Now's your starring role, mate. Up you get.
So, what do you think about this question? Thank you. So 5 transferable lessons for build to rent from best-in-class FMCG brands. As I said earlier, FMCG stands for fast-moving consumer goods. Essentially everything you buy in Tesco's or Sainsbury's. So they'll be specifically coming from my experience at Innocent, the smoothie company. And what we're looking to do is to find stuff that translates over directly into build to rent that we can learn from. So new ideas and new opportunities. I'll be presenting what-if case studies with real-world examples. And we might be questioning what is the relationship between a crushed fruit smoothie and bricks and mortar development. But I think what they have in common is they use brand as a validation, or they can use brand as a validation of premium price to really kind of lever the difference between cost price of something and the price that a consumer is willing to pay, and to justify that. They can use brand to minimize attrition, so losing a customer to a competitor, you can do that very proactively with brand and brand loyalty and advocacy. And either definition of a sector, as we're talking about build to rent, is very early. A lot of people in the street just won't even know what BTR stands for, even the phrase build to rent. So it's kind of down to us to define what that is, which is a really exciting opportunity. Or for Innocent, the fruit smoothie or fruit drinks category existed before Innocent came on the scene, but they went about redefining it and what we might expect from a brand in this area. So the first lesson, lesson 1, your product is one of your most effective marketing spaces. This was pretty much something Innocent learned on day one. They were started in 1998 with £250,000 of venture capital, which in this days of startup kind of doesn't compare. That would be the CEO's salary, 1 year salary probably. £250,000 was the entire startup budget to get them from three friends from university wanting to be entrepreneurial and create a company together to something that sold to Coca-Cola for millions and millions a few years ago. So in doing this, they didn't have any marketing or advertising budget. So what they realized that they could use their product as their marketing space because they owned it. They didn't have to buy it from a media agency or go to an advertising agency to create them television adverts. So what they did is essentially put the same kind of tone of voice that you might receive from a television script onto the side of the packaging. And before that, what was predominant in copy on these types of products was very dry. So as you're growing up, you might be like me, you might have read something like, your statutory rights aren't affected by buying this product. And who even knows what their statutory rights are, let alone if they're affected by drinking a fruit smoothie. So Innocent, essentially, they just put this kind of what's been known now as kind of like chumsy marketing copy onto the product, but worked very well for them because they didn't have to pay for it, but also it's at the point of sale. You're in a supermarket, you pick this thing up, you're like, I've never seen this before, what is it? You start reading it, you're 10 yards from a till. So you're kind of like, this is a really kind of key decision point. So if we look at how that might convert over into build to rent, we might ask, what if we match properties with tenants rather than tenants with properties? So using the example of Flip here, I don't know if you've come across this, it's a new startup in the home sales market, and their USP essentially is to take a home that's for sale on the market, but it's not occupied, and they'll do a micro renovation with it on it, using an interior designer to make it far more sellable, with the intention to lever the bid price as close to the asking price as possible and get it off the market as soon as possible. And they've proven that if you do this, those two things will more likely to happen. So this is reducing your loss. If you think of it in terms of profit and loss, the longer property is for sale on the market, the longer the current owner is paying the mortgage on it and making a loss on that if it's empty. The least someone is making an offer for it compared to its asking price, the more likely bigger that loss is going to be. So they're using this model and they call them triggers. So the interior designer will come in and they know what triggers the target audience for this property will be going for. So you see the example of kind of this plain beige room before and it made to look like a kind of a livable home afterwards, which is working very well for them. It's bringing a whole new kind of lease of life into this sector, which was kind of dominated by the likes of Foxtons for so long, which is why I'm using this phrase, we match properties with tenants rather than tenants with properties. If, like me, if you were ever looking to rent somewhere in London and you go to somewhere like Foxtons, they put you in the Mini and they drive you around 5 or 6 properties, and then at the end of that, you've got a choice which one of those you want to take out of kind of like your least level of acceptability. And kind of like, what is the worst square peg for a round hole? So the question here is, in build to rent, can we really lever this? And maybe instead of having one showroom, have 3 showrooms. One that's maybe dressed for a young professional with a workstation, a Mac laptop set up. So it would trigger in their head, I can use this as a work from home. It kind of like, it serves those properties. If it's young professionals, it could be set up for a social occasion that they can entertain friends. If it's a young family, it could be made to feel very child-friendly, or there's children's toys around. So we kind of like trigger these kind of like psychological effects. As humans, we're really kind of like, we have a very sophisticated attunement that when you came in this room, you knew to sit down, you knew that these chairs signified we're the panel, this presentation is what we're all looking at, that there's the free water on the back. We kind of pick these things up subconsciously and we read these signals. So come build to rent really kind of lean into this and lever it to their own effect and to kind of get these conversions happening far more frequently. Lesson 2, don't just offer something to buy, offer something to buy into. So Innocent started as a fruit smoothie company. When it did start to make profit and have some spare money to do marketing, rather than buy up the expensive TV adverts and front covers of Time Out magazine, it saved its money up and it ran a festival in Regent's Park every year called Fruitstock, a free music festival, which is this idea of you create a culture around your brand and you give people something, a community to come and join. So the idea that you're buying into the brand of Innocent rather than just buying the product. The second example in the bottom right there is the AGM. We started to hold every year, but it wasn't an AGM for shareholders, it was an AGM for the consumers. And the AGM standard for a grown-up meeting rather than an annual general meeting. And people used to apply to come to it, and around 100 or so representative consumers would come, and they'd kind of like hear what we've been doing for the last 12 months and what we've got planned for the next 12 months, and they'd give feedback on that. And it brought people into this community, and then that was all shared online and socially as well to kind of really open out this what we're talking about, like the halo effect of branding and marketing. So a question here might be, what if we thought beyond building and place and shape community and culture? The example I use is of Hackney Wick, a very famous kind of redevelopment area. Lots of properties have gone up there. My own first experience of Hackney Wick going to it was the Hackney Wicked Festival. It used to run every year. It's kind of like an open studio. So it's got the highest concentration of artists in Europe. And every year they used to run this festival where artists would open their studios up and you could walk around. It was almost like a Notting Hill Carnival type effect as well. And it was run as a community venture. And then as the area began to develop and prices and rent went out, it was priced out the market because it wasn't funded by any of the developers. And yet its presence was what created the culture of the area in the first place, what made it cool for the developers to then come in and kind of lever that halo effect. So it asks this question, why aren't developers working to either sponsor it or to create these types of events themselves? A second example case study would be Port Loop up in Birmingham as a new development block of these kind of three-storey residencies. And what they've done during their development phase, pre-move-in, is they gave one of these residential blocks over to an arts community organisation called The Yard, and they split this block into three kind of levels. One is called Stay, which is essentially runs as an Airbnb. One is called Play, where creatives or young people can come and use latest technology if they want to record a podcast or give a presentation, have some kind of workshop. And the ground floor is called Hay, which runs as like a community cafe that anyone can walk in. And anyone that lives in this development block can rent out this whole place at a subsidised rate, or people externally that want to come in and engage with it as a resource can also rent it out, but on a higher rate. And they have an events calendar with things like community kitchens or well-being sessions, screenings, film screenings. So they're really creating this community from what they've already got as well. So the question might be for some, how do you create community and culture from somewhere that doesn't have the initial kind of richness of somewhere like Hackney Wick, that doesn't have those artists in place, that doesn't have that creative culture, that they've done it here by using their existing resource. But it also raises something we were talking about earlier, of like thinking about this stuff from day one, that the fact that they're using a residential block to do this, and there's not a standalone community hub within the resource itself, almost alludes to the fact they didn't think about it until the last minute when they had all these empty spaces and they wanted to create a beacon effect and have people coming in, and then they were able to kind of backward engineer into it. Lesson 3, your best customer is your existing customer. So this is kind of quite universal to most forms of marketing and branding or business. It wasn't unique to Innocent, but it was something that they were able to lever very heavily. And when they started, there was about 3 different recipes of smoothie, and then they keep on increasing what are called the SKUs, the line of smoothies across different recipes, but then also different sizes and different kind of target audiences, smoothies for children. This is a video that someone made on YouTube about them drinking every single recipe in the space of about 15 minutes, which I wouldn't recommend. But it's essentially what we're saying when your best customer is your existing customer, is to have this effect, but over the course of 6 to 9 months, that people, when they get bored of one product, they move on to another. So you're not losing the customer, but also it's a very efficient way of customer acquisition. It's what the Sainsbury's try something new today phrase is based upon. That came from when Sainsbury's was competing with Tesco's, and they realised they had to make an extra 50 million a year or something to compete with Tesco's, and they had the clever strategist that rather than get that 50 million by recruiting another 25,000 customers, they could just get their existing customers to spend another £5 and do the equivalent of the same thing. And why wouldn't they do that? Because those customers they have a relationship with, they come to the store every week. So hence try something new today. If you can get a customer to just put something more, an expensive cheese in their basket, you're starting to win out over Tesco's. So the what if here, so what if build to rent tenancy terms were offered for tenant retention? Specifically is something we see in the commercial sector with places like WeWork, who are now kind of making this kind of default expectation of flexibility, that if you're starting a business, you can go to WeWork and you can scale up and scale down based upon your current needs. And you can do anything from a single hot desk to a whole exclusive suite for your company. We're seeing now this kind of being a default expectation. I'd use a comparison we spoke about at Amazon, that if anyone starts up in e-commerce now, Amazon is kind of like the set level. It's not kind of the gold standard anymore. Any e-commerce startup is expected to have one-click buy, next day delivery, return if you don't like it. And for young people now, if you don't have that, they just won't spend with you. They won't look at you. So the question is, like, how long will it be before people have got businesses with they're used to kind of WeWork terms, be expecting that from tenancy, residential tenancy. Lesson 4, define your emotional and rational benefits. So as I said, when Innocent started, they didn't have much marketing budget, so a lot of the marketing advocacy work, loyalty work was put into the product themselves. And then what happened after about 5-10 years was a credit crunch happened. Innocent was what's known as an everyday luxury. It sells at a premium price. What happens in times of recession is people start to cut off those everyday luxuries. They start to buy less £3.50 Starbucks and get a filter coffee, or just make a Nesquik, not a Nesquik, but Nescafe when they get to work. So Innocent was in this very risky area, that it was something that people should just stop buying because they need to save money. But what's also known in times of recession is people look for rational benefits far more than they do emotional benefits from products. So what we knew about our smoothies was they offered you 2 of your 5 a day, and people know that having your 5 a day is what doctors recommend. It improves your life expectancy. It's kind of a good thing to do. So we started to put these little logos on the front of the bottles very quickly. Everything was reprinted with the amount of its contribution to your 5 a day to give that rational benefit. And that saw Innocent through this kind of time of recession, and people were able to kind of justify this additional spend. How we might convert that over to build to rent. So what if build to rent made renting the smartest lifestyle and financial choice? So the example I've given here is we know a lot about consolidation when it comes to debt. If you've got lots of debt in different pots, you're advised to kind of consolidate it into one pot that's easier to manage, take out a single loan and then pay that off over a period of time. We don't talk much about consolidation of investment, which I think build to rent can really look into. If you're having these developments that have gyms, that have co-working spaces, that kind of like they cut out the need to travel between where you live and where you exercise and where you socialise. You can put all of these things together as a single package, and it makes a very smart financial choice for a renter, a tenant, or a young person. As well as they can act as private members clubs. So essentially, if you moved into one of these places, you could cut out your private members club, you could cut out your gym membership, you could cut out your co-working space and use this single development to kind of justify in your head that all of these things come in together as one. And the final lesson, lesson 5, convenience is a modern currency. So when Innocent started, its essential USP was to make it really easy to get healthy fruit into your body, because the founders, Rich, John and Adam, when they started it, they just graduated from university, they moved to London. They wanted to be healthy, but it was quite hard to do that in kind of that time. It was the boom time in London that people were going out a lot and enjoying themselves. And if you think that this is the equivalent to a 1 litre smoothie, all that fruit, very rarely will people put that amount of fruit in their weekly shopping basket, or that kind of like diversity of fruit. People might put a bunch of bananas or a bag of apples, but to have all of the strawberries, the bananas, the mangoes, apples, everything together. So it makes it really easy to consume the fruit in one go. And essentially you just kind of, you offer people convenience rather as much as you do kind of a tasty drink, a first-rate drink. So if we look in build to rent, how we might lever convenience, developments that are crafted for maximum convenience. So we now know kind of Amazon lockers, we see them all over at train stations, make it very easy for people to collect parcels when they're out during the daytime or they don't want to get it delivered to work. So what if every development had an Amazon locker in its reception? I know lots of developments have already done that. Things like TaskRabbit, what if there's a TaskRabbit in-house consultant? They offer so many different things that they can put furniture together for you, they can do your packing for you, they'll do your cleaning for you. It's almost endless, the amount of services that they can offer to people, and now younger generations are so used to using these one-click services. Or another example is the Library of Things, which is a new kind of community initiative. When we talk about social impact as well, they're really good at it. So their emphasis is, why does everyone on the street own their own lawnmower and strimmer and only use them once a month? Why don't we just have one lawnmower for the whole street and everyone shares it? And it's kind of, there's a very kind of environmental, pro-environmental logic to that as well. So they've created something called the Library of Things, where you get all of these shared resources, and it doesn't just have to be DIY things. It can be like something like a PlayStation. You might not want to buy a high-spec PlayStation if you've got your friends coming over, or a VR headset that you could just hire it from them rather than every single person having to buy afresh each time. So in conclusion, loyalty and advocacy are competitive advantages in a service economy. So I spoke earlier about kind of like this tipping point between sales and rent, going away from awareness, consideration and conversion, or not away from it, but just extending then into loyalty and advocacy, which are areas that sectors like FMCG really invest in. So when we talk about loyalty, you can then relate that back to conversion. The more loyal someone is, the more they're going to keep up their monthly rent payments and stay with you for the long haul, so you don't have to chase a new conversion each time. And then advocacy, as we spoke about, that you don't actually need to do the marketing, that your existing tenants can then recommend to friends, and then that loops back round to new awareness. And not only is that the cheapest form of marketing, it's the most influential. That studies have been done where you kind of like, you show someone a new brand that's got a really nice TV advert, and then one of their friends recommends this brand to them. The friend's recommendation will be twice as likely to positively influence that person, because we're all social beings and we trust our friends. And I'll put the little asterisk there, the Net Promoter Score is a way of measuring this, as I spoke about the kind of detail of that, how that can work, and how it's proven as well that you can outperform the market if you get this formula right. So that was a whistle-stop tour. Thank you for staying with me. I don't know how far we might have gone over.
Yeah, I think we've gone over a little bit, but thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks to our wonderful panel. Hopefully you heard some stuff today that was interesting to you guys. If you want to speak to anyone on the panel, we're at stand 22 for a little bit after this, and maybe we'll see some of you at the dinner. But thanks for stopping by, and have a good rest of the day.